Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Fitness Education Series produced by the Australian Fitness Academy. It's like progressive overload for your brain. I'm your host, Tom Rock, and in today's episode we're going to talk about hamstring injuries. So shout out to Julie for sending through an article on this one. Julie got in touch, thought it'd be an article I was interested in. She was definitely correct. And it was all about hamstring injuries. Fortunately, one of Julie's mates, Chris, has recently done her hamstring and has had surgery. So best of luck with the rehab, Chris, and the recovery. Stick to that rehab program. You'll be on the mend in no time, I'm sure. Hopefully it all goes well. But this article that Julie sent through, I'll put a link to it in the description so you can have a bit of a read yourself. It's more in regards to sort of athletes and the idea of preventing hamstring injuries, which is a really interesting concept, a good one to cover. And yeah, having previously worked with a number of athletes in the past and teams of athletes in team sports, it's a big focus area is injury prevention. Obviously, if athletes get injured, they're not able to get out and perform their job, basically. So a big task of the high performance team and the strength and conditioning coaches is creating programs that are designed to prevent injury. Now, there's definitely hamstring injuries out there that are not preventable or you can't really reduce the risk of. And there's certain circumstances where if I slip or have there's a slippery surface, or even I remember Mick Fanning tore his hamstring off the bone when he was surfing. He sort of fell off and one leg was stuck on the board as it sort of got taken away from him. So his leg sort of gets stretched out to its side, and then the hamstring sort of unfortunately got torn off the bone. So some hamstring injuries will just happen, and there's nothing we can do really to reduce the risk other than not do anything, which is not the answer at all. But this article discussed the idea of hamstring injuries, why they happen, and discuss the idea of trying to prevent them or definitely reduce the risk of them happening. And it discusses when hamstring injuries happen in sport, and a lot of the time that does happen when an athlete is sprinting. So during sprinting and our running gait, we have what's called the late swing phase, and that's when our leg, and the idea is when our leg, just as our leg hits the ground, our hamstring needs to gets under a lot of tension. And it's eccentric stress on the hamstring that is trying to control our body weight, slow that leg down, and that's when we generate a lot of force going through that hamstring as the muscle is at a long length, which is what's making it susceptible to injury, or what increases that risk of injury. And that's generally where we see a majority of hamstring injuries happen in athletes who are doing sort of those fast sprinting actions or sprinting or change of direction, but generally it's that high speed, maximum speed sprinting that will put a lot of force on the hamstring. So the article sort of goes into how do we reduce this risk of hamstring injury, and it's something that is applied a lot in elite sport. Probably could do more education around it in sub-elite sport, I think, for sure, because there's a lot of people out there that play sport recreationally on weekends, and the idea around resistance training and using that to reduce injury, I think, is really important. So it allows you to build your muscle strength up and build some resilience. So when you do go out and do these high-speed running actions that do create a lot of force or put the muscle under a lot of strain and force, then your body has the ability to cope with that. And the article talks about an exercise called the Nordic hamstring curl, which is an eccentric based movement where the hamstring is at a longer length. So it's one that sort of works that hamstring through that lengthening or high force under that lengthening process as it's contracting eccentrically. And that one has sort of in research been shown to reduce hamstring injuries quite well. It's definitely not the be all and end all in terms of a strength program, and there's lots of stuff that will improve the robustness of a hamstring, but it's one that has been heavily researched probably in the last 5 to 10 years in terms of having the beneficial factor of reducing hamstring injury by increasing its strength under eccentric load, as it works eccentrically. It is a more advanced exercise, so if you it's definitely one worth looking up if you're not sure what it is. It's the Nordic hamstring curl, and basically you go into sort of knee extension as you lean over and hinge over from the knees. So have a look at it, look it up. It's a very advanced exercise, so it's not something that you can just go in. It's not always easy to do. Sometimes you need to have your feet hooked under something, or you need a partner there to be holding your ankles down as you lean forward. So it's not always easy to set up or complete if you don't have the right equipment. And it's also a very, very, very tough exercise. Not many, if you have never done it before, you haven't built up a base level of hamstring strength, it's going to be you're going to find it very hard to complete well. It's an eccentric based exercise generally, so you can do it both ways, but usually you're sort of lowering yourself down in a controlled manner. It will cause potentially a lot of muscle soreness if you've never done it before, or do too many reps. So it's something that I wouldn't recommend jumping straight into if you've never done it before. If you want to give it a try, definitely err on the side of not doing too many, and just practicing, because you will find you pull up quite sore from these if you do too many. They are quite tough. It also then, so I think it's an interesting component, because we want to obviously include potentially these risk mitigating exercise in our program, but this is a quite advanced one, and it works hand in hand. If we do too much of this and then we go out and sprint, we've probably fatigued our hamstring, and maybe increased the risk if we haven't allowed enough recovery between sessions, or our training load gets increased too much. So it's important to build up slowly, or build into exercise slowly. The other thing that the article does mention, which is really important, is that regular sprinting or sprint training is going to also be a protective factor against hamstring injury, and that is also improves the body's ability to handle that load. So any training session we do in terms of the gym or cardiovascular training or sprint training, it applies a stimulus to the body, and then our body adapts. We supercompensate, get a little bit stronger, so next time that stimulus happens, our body is able to handle it better. And that's the idea of sprinting as well. If we work on our sprinting and we do sprint training regularly, our body gets used to that action, and we're able to cope with the forces that it puts the body under. If we go for a long time without sprinting, and all of a sudden we do a lot of sprinting, that's when our muscle may get fatigued, or it may not be robust enough to handle the high forces that it's going under. So it's going to increase the risk of, say, a hamstring injury. So it's important to understand that while resistance training is really important, consistently or building into our whatever actions we're going to put our body under, building into it and slowly increasing training load or speed is really important to strengthening our body to reduce risks of injuries such as these. Hamstrings aren't the only one, but it's a good example, I think, and it's a very important thing to understand going forward, or implementing in your own training if you're doing recreational sports, or you have clients doing recreational sports, is how can we manage training load. And it's something that's sort of done a little bit at the elite level, and quite in depth at the elite level, where we look at how many Ks they're doing, how many Ks of high speed running, how many sprint efforts are they doing, and it's all monitored very, very closely to watch for strength detriments or strength decreases in the gym, recovery, how they're recovering, and there's lots of different monitoring processes throughout each week, each 2 weeks, and very regularly, to make sure these athletes are recovering and they're not putting themselves at increased risk. But in a sub-elite environment or a general population environment, that week-to-week monitoring, soreness monitoring, strength testing doesn't necessarily always, or can't always happen. It's not always feasible. So building up training loads and have an understanding of training loads is super important, and how we apply exercises to different clients is important. If I went out and did Nordic hamstring curls with a client on a Friday, but they're playing AFL football on a Saturday, they're just going to go into that game with a completely probably a fatigued hamstring in a fatigue state, and probably increase their risk of injury if I was to do that. So understanding where to apply these exercises, how to apply them, is really important for some of those more advanced, especially the eccentric based exercises. Um, but the article also mentions um, consistency as well. I think that's important. So we've got to make sure we're consistently training these things so we don't drop off. If I do all this great work pre-season and then I don't do anything for the 8-10 weeks as we build into the season or in season, then I'm going to start to lose those protective capacities of my sprint training, of my Nordic hamstring curls, and my body is going to sort of regress. And then towards the end of the season, I might be more susceptible to, say, hamstring strain. So something that needs to be done consistently, and then obviously management of training load is something that's also going to be an important factor in hamstring strains. And so, yeah, really cool article, very sort of explanatory, touches on some really good concepts in terms of injury prevention in athletes, but definitely things I think that can be brought over to clients or can assist in working with general population clients who do enjoy their recreational sport on weekends, which is really, really cool. So improving their performance or reducing the risk of injury definitely can be brought over. But thanks for sending that article through, Julie. Very good. I enjoyed reading it and sort of, yeah, diving back into the world of athlete development and injury prevention. Really, really cool, but lots of great stuff out there. Anyway, guys, hope you got a bit out of that. If you do have any thoughts on this topic or any questions or topics you would like me to discuss or have a look at, please send an email to tom@afa.com.au. Definitely happy to cover off anything you guys would like to get my opinion on or hear me chat about. Other than that, guys, have a great weekend, and I'll talk to you all soon.